What I'd like to do right now is to demonstrate the setup and of the USR-08 and the different RX modes and how they're used in receiving data from different kinds of transmitters, including telemetry transmitters. So the basic setup here is the USR-08, a DH4 directional hydrophone, and 3 transmitters, 2 of which are at 75 kilohertz. One is the man-track tag that comes with the man-track. One is also at 75 kilohertz, but is a temperature transmitter that the temperature will actually show up on the display. And then also another kind of telemetry transmitter, an EMT that's an angle reporting pinger that will also show up the tilt angle in the display of the receiver when the proper mode is selected. So first of all, we'll put these down and just show how the receiver can be set up to scan for just those 2 frequencies. So we can begin by pressing the mode key while the power is off and then turning the power on. The receiver will go ahead and go through a self-test and will begin the again its setup. With the screen coming on while my finger is pressed on the mode button while turning the unit on. Once I release my finger, the display will switch to showing local in the bottom, and it will switch between local and PC. In this case, we want to do a local setup and not involve the PC, so we'll leave it there, and we'll use the mode button to move between the next category to the next category. This contrast value it gives it ability to change the contrast in the display, and furthermore you can have a low or high contrast setting. Those can be left as is for this in this example. The receive mode, the RX mode, allows us to select between different kinds of telemetry. In this case, I'm going to leave it at TC, which stands for temperature in degrees C. And I'm going to select now just to scan for 2 different frequencies. And the first one is 75 kilohertz, and I'll press mode to confirm that. But the next one I'm going to change to 74 kilohertz. Here we see the scan delay in the display. We can leave the default setting. The filter also is a default setting. The communication port, because of we don't actually have a communication port on this unit, we'll leave that off. But here I'd like to turn the local beeper on. This is a diagnostic tool that's especially helpful when we're dealing inside of an office environment where it's kind of quiet, and that'll enable an internal beeper so that we don't have to have a speaker hooked up when we're working on this. The GPS there is turned off because there isn't one available, and even though the time is incorrect, since we're not actually logging that right now, we're going to leave that be. We're going to leave the reset alone and not enable factory defaults. So at this point, the display will actually show up one of the last frequencies that was scanned, and we can go and momentarily press the scan button, and it'll actually take us to the next frequency, which were of those 2 frequencies that were available to us. And I'm going to put that at 75 kilohertz now and bring over a 75 kilohertz temperature transmitter. And here we actually see the telemetry that it's 26.5 degrees C, a little warm in the office today, and actually going back to the ID, and it will actually toggle back and forth. And if I'm fairly quiet, we can actually hear the beep going off in the background. So if you'll notice that volume is pretty subdued, so it's only going to be heard inside of an office. The fast pinging that occurred was when the telemetry, in this case what the temperature was viewed, what was being sent, and these pauses, these codes that are available on the receiver, on the 5657, are the pattern of oral beeps that you hear when it's not transmitting the telemetry. We can also take a look now at what the 74 kilohertz transmitter would be. And in this particular case, this particular transmitter has a magnet attached to it to turn it off. And so we'll remove the magnet in order to turn it on, and we'll actually hear it beeping. But we'll see that in the display that the telemetry is wrong, that it looks like it's 1 degree C. That's because we have the mode is not set correctly. The ID, however, it comes up as ID number 6, that is correct. But what we're going to do now is we don't have to turn the receiver off. In this case, we can press and hold the mode key while the power is on. It first goes to gain and then switches to setup. And I can change this to tilt. The rest of the settings will leave as default. And then what will happen is we'll see the ID first come up, which will take about 20 seconds as it scans through that. And then as I have the transmitter tilted, we'll actually see what the angle in degrees that it's tilted away from normal. In this case, it's 25 degrees off normal. So another thing to note here is that transmitters in general, fisheries transmitters, are usually shipped in an off condition. So in this particular case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that the transmitters that cannot be heard, any other transmitters, I'm going to set the receiver back to 75 kilohertz. I can do that either manually here, or I can go through and set to the next value that's there on the display. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put the magnet by where the magnet, you'll hear 2 beeps, and then it comes back alive and it starts to transmit with and identifies itself as number 37. We can also hear this particular code 344 being repeated over and over again. So one other feature that's available is to actually have the receiver in scanning to scan through all the different frequencies. In this case, only 2. And we do that by pressing and holding the scan button until it says scan in the display. And in that case, the receiver will go back and forth between the different frequencies that are stored. In this case, it will go in 74, then switch to 75 automatically. And by changing, there are some setup values for the scan delay that allows us to change what that delay is going to be. And here we end up with the ID of 37, and we're going back and forth. So we can use these different modes to set up the receiver and to set up the transmitters using just some simple keyboard commands.